Martin does find time to travel, as he did when he entertained the U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia last year. Though Martin is shy and slightly guarded in crowds, it doesn't stop people from wanting to approach this guy who seems to have comic magnetism.
Hi, Steve. Hey, Steve. Hi, Steve. Best of luck in your film tonight. With the interview? When you get serious, everyone wants to be there.
When we sat down with Steve at the Ritz Carlton Hotel in Boston, we found him to be exactly as his autograph card reads: warm, polite, intelligent, and funny. And even though Martin may be handing out his cards instead of signing autographs, we discovered that Martin himself has been caught seeking celebrity signatures. I understand that when you were touring and you played Vegas, that you had a backstage visit from none other than Elvis.
Yeah, that's true.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was opening for Anne Margaret, and that's another story because, you know, we were scheduled to play there for 5 weeks, and I had this fabulous dressing room. I thought, hey, they're really treating me with respect here. I got this beautiful, beautiful dressing room. Well, Anne Margaret got sick, so we only played 4 weeks. But nobody called me to tell me we had been, that she had canceled. And I went in to do the night show, and all my stuff was sitting out in the hall. And now someone else was in this fabulous dressing room. It was like, goodbye, get out, you're done. Well, anyway, so I was backstage, and I see coming around the corner, out of the corner of my eye, a very beautiful woman. And she's walking toward me. She goes, hello. And it was Priscilla Presley. I didn't recognize her at the time. And then she moved aside, and there was Elvis. And it's the strangest feeling in the world to have grown up with Elvis, and then suddenly Elvis is standing, not a look-alike, or not an imitator. It was Elvis Presley, and he was very friendly. I remember we started talking to him, my manager, Bill McEwen, and I. We started talking to him, and we were talking to him about 10 minutes, and suddenly one of Elvis's sort of bodyguards comes up to Elvis and says, Elvis, they said we've got to go now. And Elvis went, it's okay. Meaning, Elvis had this person to always come up and say, we got to go now, it's to get him out of a situation that he was uncomfortable in. And he had guns on him, which he did. He showed, Elvis had guns on him. He showed us his guns. He had a Derringer in his back here.
Do you recall any of the conversation?
He said, as I remember, as he passed me, he had seen the show, and he was passing the doorway to go into Anne Margaret's dressing room, and he said, son, you got an oblique sense of humor.
I guess that's a compliment.
Well, actually it was, because he later said, I have the same oblique sense of humor. When he's on stage, he said he says jokes that people really don't quite get. And he was very funny on stage.
He didn't have your delivery, I guess.
Well, he had something else.
Now, did you
Actually, that I'd rather have.
Did you swap autographs or anything?
No, I didn't want to buy. I didn't want to ask for his autograph.
Have you ever sought an autograph from anyone?
Yes. Earl Scruggs.
Earl Scruggs, the banjo player.
Banjo player.
Okay.
And Bobby Fischer.
The world champion chess player.
That's right.
And why? Why Bobby
I don't know.
Fischer?
I was so, you know, Bobby Fischer was such a legend. I mean, not a legend. He was, seemed so mysterious. This 14-year-old kid, I mean, when he first started out, and was a world champion chess player. And he seemed so enigmatic. And one time I found myself at Benihana's, which is a Japanese restaurant where you find yourself sitting with strangers around a plate where they cook right in front of you. You know that?
Sure.
That bit.
All right.
And I look over, and I hear this person saying, and I couldn't play because the lights weren't right, and I knew I wouldn't be able to see my men, and I knew this was in the news at the time because Bobby Fischer didn't want to play in Iceland or something because the lights weren't right. I went, it's Bobby Fischer. And I looked over, and there he was, and I couldn't believe it.
Huh. And you spontaneously asked for his autograph?
No, I'm ashamed to say I followed him into the men's room.
And then asked for his autograph?
Absolutely.
Okay. And was there any discourse, conversation?
No, not much, because he actually, I think, was a weird and enigmatic guy.
Now, you've played a dad in Father of the Bride and Parenthood and some other movies, and I'm sure a lot of people ask you about this, and maybe you don't like the pressure of being asked about this, but any plans to have kids on your own in real life?
Well, I've never figured out how it's done. It's just a thing of mine. I don't know. I think it's too personal. You know, how can I?
Too personal to discuss openly.
Yeah, you know, it's like, it's about sex. It's about a lot of things. It's, you know.
Okay.
You know, I don't want somebody coming up to me on the street saying, "Hey, here you're planning to have kids."
As some other couples have announced publicly,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, we're working on it on a daily basis. Thanks a lot. Good luck. Thank you.
Who makes you laugh?
Well, let's see. Lots of people. I like comedy, and generally, almost any comedian has something to offer.
You're being overly generous now.
Well, I try to be, because I know that comedy's hard. And, you know, there's the old timers, you know, Jack Benny, or even, I wouldn't call Steve Allen an old timer, but he certainly made me laugh and inspired me in the early days, and Laurel and Hardy, and, you know, Sam Kinison made me laugh, and just lots of people. David Brenner made me laugh, and Robert Klein made me laugh, and George Carlin.
Well, how about the current crop of...
Well, I don't know who they are.
You don't go to comedy clubs? And
No,
you
I
don't watch...
can't. I can't, because it brings back too many memories.
One thing you do continue to do from time to time is guest host Saturday Night Live. And you've assumed sort of an elder statesman status.
Isn't it tragic?
No, I don't think so. I think people love seeing you there.
Lorne Michaels, who produces the show, is a close friend of mine, so we're always talking all the time, and he'll say, "Hey, you want to do the show?" Or I'll say, "Hey, maybe I'd like to do the show," and it just comes about. It's really fun when you do it.
It must be a different feeling for you doing it now as opposed to doing it with the original troupe of Danny and John and Gilda.
Well, it is mostly because my life has changed so much. You know, going from stand-up to film, it's a whole different feeling. But the current cast is really talented. So that's the fun part of going in to work on the show.
So you get a good feeling when you go in there and you're...
Yes, and they're just as enthusiastic and just as talented in a different way.
There's so many comedians, Seinfeld, Roseanne, Bill Cosby, who have done sitcoms. Surely you've been approached to do that. There must have been that temptation at some point in your career. Why have you resisted?
First, it truly never came up.
Really?
For me, no. You know, I was doing stand-up, and I knew I wanted to go into movies. I think someone early on in my career said, you know, I've seen the difference between movie stars and TV stars. And a TV star will go into a room, and everybody feels like they know you, and they come up, and they're your pal, and they slap you on the back, and this and that. And they said, a movie star comes in, and it's sort of a little bit more respect, a little bit of a distance.
And you like
know?
that?
And I like that.
Yeah.
But also I like what you can do in movies. You're not doing the same thing all the time. You're doing something new. That's mainly the reason.
I guess in the same vein, Chevy Chase, Whoopi Goldberg...
I mean, for example, I'll continue that.
Sure.
Roseanne, tabloids. You know, because it's a TV star. They get much more intimate with their... The press gets much more involved in their personal daily life and making up things, and I don't want that.
Right. And you have assiduously avoided tabloid-like behavior, certainly, and the tabloids have pretty much left you alone, it seems.
Yeah.
No opportunities to sue them for $20 million.
No, darn.
I was saying, in the same vein, Chevy Chase, Whoopi Goldberg are all entering the talk show arena as talk show hosts. Is that anything you could even imagine yourself doing?
Not really. I'm just so interested in what I'm doing now. I just hope that it will never go away.
By the way, you know, it's not too much to ask. Would you mind not going around the house dressed like that?
Like this?
Yes, like that. And not just that, you know, because a lot of what you wear, you know, you happen to look very pert. And I have to live here too, and I just wouldn't want to, you know.
What?
To confuse the situation.
Housesitter is such a funny movie. How could you tell while you're making a movie whether the humor is working or not?
You absolutely cannot. You hope and you keep your fingers crossed, and it seemed funny on the page, and it seemed funny when you were shooting it, but the 5 minutes before the picture rolls, for the first time ever with an audience, you're convinced it stinks. And even in this film, there's a scene that happens to work very well, where I sing "Touraloo, Allure" at a party, and we were so unsure whether this scene was going to work. We shot it so we could lift it out and would have coverage on other angles that we could make it look like it was never in the movie, because at the time it seemed so daring and weird and odd. Of course, as soon as it works, we lean over and say, "I knew it all along." But
And it is a hilarious moment in the film.
well, comedy is just an unpredictable beast.
Whose feedback
Sort of like
do you
having
trust?
a bad dog. You never
How
know.
so?
You never know if it's going to wet on your kitchen floor.
Housesitter has some wonderful physical humor, which of course you're famous for. And I wonder, in some of the, to use some specific instances, there's that great tumble over the couch, Dick Van Dyke style. Is that something that's improvised, or is that...
Well, in that case, it was.
Yeah.
But, the hard thing about doing physical comedy, or say I'm known for doing physical comedy, is you have to be very careful you don't just do it for the sake of doing it, that it has a logic, and it's not just otherwise it comes off like shtick. In this case, it's a character who comes into his own house that's never had furniture in it before, so he's not used to the rug on the floor, and he's not used to the sofa in that position, and he's in the middle of a big argument, so he's thinking the room is empty. So that's why he trips on the carpet and why he goes over the sofa. It's not just, it's integrated into the scene. It's not just something there to stick out.
Your character is an architect who gets to build his dream house in Housesitter. What would your dream house be like? What requirements would there be?
Well, I guess a lot like, let me give you an example. Have you ever been to Buckingham Palace? No, I would like a nice, small, when I say small, enough to house all your stuff. So you have a lot of room, couple of offices, a guest room, but quaint and small, not overly done.
You're a well-known connoisseur of art and a collector of art. How did you get started? Do you remember the first piece you bought?
This is an area of my life that I try to keep private. I don't know, it's hard to explain why, but in show business, everything is so picked over, and so much news is created out of nothing, and that's really what, to me, this amounts to. It's like a private little thing of mine, and I think it should be kept that way.
Fair enough, but does collecting art inspire you to perhaps paint on your own?
No, I'm the worst.
Okay,
The worst.
so you've never
It's
taken up the canvas
the
yourself?
paper is worth less after I finish with it.
Okay.
It was a better blank.
A couple times a year, poker with some other entertainers?
Yeah, this is a very odd poker game, and of course we do not play for money.
Of course not.
But in that, most poker games that you hear about or read about, they go till 4 in the morning and everybody has a greasy sandwich and they order in pizza at 2 a.m. This is the most, pardon me, female poker game you can imagine. We come in and everybody sits around and we converse for 15 minutes. Now usually they'd be ripping open the cards and going, let's go.
But these are all guys now?
These are all guys.
Okay.
In show business. And then we have a dinner. Like go to Dan Melnick, a producer I've worked with several times. We go to the dining room and he prepares this sort of gourmet dinner. And we sit down and have this dinner and talk for 40 minutes, and then we go back and we play for another half hour and go home. It's like,
and that's it.
Yeah, it's just a load of fun. And because the people who play are generally funny people, it's just a good evening. Good.
Are you a good poker player?
I'm okay.
Do you bluff?
I don't want to tell. I mean, one of the players might be watching.
Okay. Do you usually come out ahead at the end of the night?
You win some, you lose some. I don't know. It's sort of like the movie business.
Right. It evens out over the course of...
Yeah, you might go home with, I don't know, $250,000.
A little like the movie
These guys are
business now.
loaded. I'm telling you.
Some of your most successful movies have actually been remakes of other movies. Father of the Bride,
Right.
certainly. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was originally Bedtime Story with
Right.
Marlon Brando. And Roxanne, it's not exactly a remake,
Not
but it's
exactly,
an update of The Great Place, Cyrano de Bergerac. And I wonder if last question. You could choose any movie you wanted, not worrying about who owns the rights to it. Which film you would like to remake? What character you would like to reprise yourself?
Well, of course, the only reason this wouldn't be good for me is I really wouldn't look good in an Arab headdress, but of course Lawrence of Arabia. I could picture myself maybe doing the comedy version of Lawrence of Arabia. You know,
Well, there's a concept.
Maybe instead of a camel, we have a Shetland pony. I don't know.
In Peter O'Toole's role.
Right, in the Peter O'Toole Peter O'Toole role, just Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence, the sun would be setting behind me and I'd be racing on the camel. It'd be kind of beautiful, don't you think?
I do. I definitely do, and I'll keep my eye out for that. Thanks very much for coming.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right. Good night.